Joining us this week in studio is Representative Rasheen Aldridge, a House Democrat, to help us recap and review much of the week that was on these inaugural events. Representative Aldridge, great to have you with us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're going to get into a lot of what we saw in Jefferson City and some of your political future as you hope for it to unravel as we talk to you. And for our viewers joining us, we also expect to have Congresswoman Cori Bush joining us at any moment here with an update on some of the chaos in Congress as Republicans search for their House Speaker. Will it be Kevin McCarthy or some unknown candidate? She will join us from the Democratic side of the aisle. But first, I want to get your recap, some of the pomp and circumstance and ceremony to happen in Jefferson City this week. It's always a special time for members to take their seats. What stood out to you? Democrats are clearly in the super minority. How do you negotiate when you're up against a veto-proof majority?
Yeah, so yesterday began the 102nd General Assembly first session. You know, what really stood out to me and I'm excited about as we enter this next session is House Democrats, even though we're in the super minority, we were able to pick up several seats throughout the state of Missouri, which I think is going to be good for a lot of conversations that happen. Even though we're still minority, what we also find a lot of times in Jefferson City is there's a lot of infighting with the majority party. And sometimes there's a lot of infighting when it comes to rural Republicans and kind of your urban Republicans. So I think with having less Republicans up there, there'll be more conversation, at least for negotiation. I'm excited for our new speaker that's come to the House, Speaker St. Louis County. For my years of being up there, he seems to be very reasonable to work with. He's been a great floor leader. I'm hopeful that he'll be a speaker that will be willing to negotiate with our side. You know, there's some things that both parties will draw a line in the sand, but I think he's going to be a lot different from the previous speaker to actually move Missouri forward together. He
started out, and we hope to have Speaker Blocker on with us, the newly sworn-in Speaker of the House in the weeks to come, but he started out saying he's going to give fair hearing to several Republicans who want to take local control of the city's police department or of other parts of city government and return that to the state.
Yeah.
Where would you stand on issues like that?
Extremely opposed against it. I believe in local control. I believe if the citizens of St. Louis City area believe that we want our police department to go back under the state of Missouri, that should be a ballot initiative. That should be the people that live here, that play here, that pay taxes here to decide where they will want their police department to go.
You mentioned a ballot initiative, and one of the big agenda items in the House and the Senate from Republicans is to make it harder for Missouri voters to change the Constitution. Right now, getting a question on the ballot is tough, but then it's relatively easy to pass it. You just need 50% plus one of the voters to approve it. That's a low threshold to approve. It's harder to actually put that question on the ballot. Why do you think Republicans are so hell-bent on making that harder in this political environment right now?
I think Republicans understand that the initiative petition process is truly a process that's a people-driven process. You know, up in Jeff City, with being in super minority and they're in super majority, a lot of things that I think people in the state of Missouri really want to see, it gets held up in Jeff City because of political rhetoric and people partyology. What you've seen recently with a lot of ballot initiative, it's been the medical marijuana, if it's been a minimum wage increase, you know, issues that I think everyday people, no matter regardless of the party that you fall on, are in agreement that we need to kind of move in this direction of making sure that we pass legislation that actually help people. And every time I think there's ballot initiative things, it tends to be things that the other side don't like.
Representative Aldridge, thank you. We're going to come back to you in just a moment. I'm told that Congresswoman Cori Bush is now joining us from Capitol Hill. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us. Last I heard, we're 9 rounds of balloting into this process as Republicans search for a speaker. How would you characterize these last few days you've seen on the Hill?
It's been unbelievable, but my entire term has been unbelievable. You know, my 3rd day in office there was a violent insurrection on the U.S. Capitol. So now I haven't even been sworn in this time. So just to remind everybody, none of Congress on the House side has been sworn in yet. So we are still members elect. And what we're hearing as we're sitting there for hours on the floor voting over and over again in Hakeem Jeffries' continues to get 212 votes. He is the lead vote getter. Round after round, we keep hearing that this is going to continue to go on because those that are voting for people on the Republican side, other than Kevin McCarthy, they're saying that they're not going to stop. They're not going to back down. They're going to keep going until they have someone elected that they want to see in the seat. It's been tough though, because we want to serve the people. We've heard for 2 years, at least I know I have, for 2 years, that when we take over, we're going to govern. When we take over, we're going to show the Republicans, the Democrats, how to lead. We're going to take care of the people. Well, that's not what's happening right now. They're not taking care of the people. They're not governing. Give it back to the Democrats. Let us do it. If you choose not to, but they've had 2 years to figure this out, and it's just like over the last 2 years, or at least since November. Why couldn't they get that together so we could have been ready on day one? Now we're here the day before the second anniversary of the insurrection. Trump's name come across as someone that they're voting for.
It's certainly interesting to see. Most political observers haven't seen something like this on television. Certainly, the last time we had a protracted speaker fight like this was 100 years ago, first in a century to see this. So just for people who might be about the real world implications, this is much different than, say, a full-out government shutdown. But are there actual parts of the delivery of services, things that you can do from you're an incumbent, right? You're not newly sworn in. So are there things that you're not able to access as a member-elect in this sort of limbo land that you're in right now? Are people somehow being denied in any real-world way, or is this just waiting to actually start the committee assignment and the bill filing processes?
Well, actually, it can affect a lot more. We have had reports. Even our own office has had some difficulty being able to help people, our constituents, to be able to, the resources they need as far as federal agencies. We've heard it from several other offices within our caucus saying that they reached out to a federal agency and were told, we're sorry, we can't help your constituent because your member is not sworn in yet. So there has been some ripple effects of this already. Now, our office is trying to work with the White House, which we know that, we believe that will be successful. Work with the White House to see if they can, make sure that the federal agencies know that, like, hey, when any of our offices call, let the federal agencies know that they really need to help us to take care of our constituents, because, it's not their fault that we're in a place where we don't have a speaker elected.
Mm-hmm. You've talked somewhat at length about your role as a leader in the way you're able to represent race and people of color in Congress. And I want to get your reaction. Some people who follow you on Twitter might have seen one of your interactions with Florida Congressman Byron Donald. Also, so he said this. He said, quote, "If you see a black man rise, let the man rise, even if you disagree with them." As you know, he was nominated for 1 or 2 votes to be Speaker, and you responded to him. How do you characterize this spat? He's a Republican, a conservative, but a black man who feels like he's garnering support for a position. Is there some merit to that alone?
No, because the thing is, he was not. The thing is, I'm sorry, they're beating the door for me. There are some, well, let me just say this. I don't have a problem with him being a Republican running for Speaker. Not at all. I don't have a problem with him being a black Republican running for Speaker. Actually, I love it. Like, go ahead and do that. Like, I support that. What I don't support, MAGA Republican, running for Speaker, number one, regardless of what your color is. And number two, the issue is, this is, before yesterday, there was no talk about nominating him for this seat. This is not something that has been going on for 2 years. This is not something that's been going on for 2 months. And so to put him up as a nomination, Hakeem Jeffries, a black man, it has consistently received 212 votes, the 100% of our caucus. to use that as a ploy, to try to peel off some of the Democrats, like, oh, we have to vote for, we need to switch our votes from Hakeem Jeffries to Byron Donalds because he's a black man, and now that will make everybody come together. No, that's not what this is. We have someone. So Byron Donalds came in with me. We're in the same class. So my issue, though, is not with him being a black man at all. I feel like the Republicans are using him as a ploy, not because they really stand by him. And I'll just be honest. If there was a white person who was running, who was the number one person, leading our caucus for speaker, would they have put Byron Donalds up? Would he be the one? I want to support him. I want him to come over to the freedom side, and I want to support him to be successful and do great things. But being a MAGA Republican, being someone who voted to overturn the Democratic election, being someone who supports the fascism that's happening in this country, I cannot support that, and I cannot sit back and allow that information not to be known to the country. I don't want people looking at, hey, this is the other, and we Democrats, you need to, go ahead and jump ship because you never have, the 218 votes. I wanted it to be clear. Like, that's just not what this is. So it's no attack against him personally.
I hear you, and I appreciate you joining us in this this whipped around fashion that we have here. I know that you're just trying to find any place to join us round of voting.
Yeah, I'm off the floor.
Yeah,
I'm in a cloakroom. I'm sorry.
Totally understand that. Before we let you go, and again, we thank you for joining us, but I want to ask you about agenda and policy items that you might confront with a divided Congress. Republicans controlling the House, Democrats still holding the Senate. But we've heard from senators like Tammy Duckworth in Illinois just this week telling us, yes, there is a problem at the southern border on immigration. We know House Republicans are motivated to highlight that point. And President Biden planning a trip to the southern border right now. Do you think there is this unique moment in a divided Congress where you can confront this issue of immigration? And do you agree that there is a problem at the southern border?
I think that the issues at the southern border are much broader than what is being pushed by the Republicans. I've been to the border myself many times. I've also been to many of the countries where people, where there are a lot of folks showing up at the border. I've talked with them on both sides of the border. I've met with those families. I've talked with presidents of those countries. I've met with their administrations. And so,
what's the path forward, though? What are the proposals you can take to?
Yeah, well, I think the thing is this: when we're talking about how we secure our border, securing our border isn't just making sure that we have more, border patrol people at the border. They were putting up more walls. That's not what it is. We need to make sure that there are resources for those that are seeking asylum, because people aren't just trying to cross the border because they just want to go to a different country. People are hurting. People are, I've been there listening in those countries to what's been happening. I've been up in those villages watching what is happening to the folks the folks living in danger like we don't see here in the United States. We have our own. We have our own issues, of course, but danger like we don't have. And I want to make sure that I'm someone speaking up to make sure that everyone has access to being able to live in a safe and a healthy environment.
And my last question to you is this, just before we let you go. I saw your reaction, but I wondered if you'd like to share with our audience the reaction to Governor Parson continuing and carrying out the execution of Amber McLaughlin earlier this week. And I'll point out that in his statement, his public press release did not use her chosen name, her name Amber. He used her dead name. She was a transgender inmate who was executed earlier this week. What did you make of that?
It's a lack of respect for a human. A lack of respect. This is a human being. Like, she changed her name. She changed her name. That's her dead name. She didn't want that name. Call her by her name. But even more so, let her live. Like, let her live. I'm disgusted. We have right now the deadliest governor. I thought he's the hashtag deadly governor. And it's a shame that he is our governor. But we have an opportunity to change that, and so I'll be looking at working on that too.
Do you care to make any announcements about 2024?
Oh, no. nothing for me. Nothing for me.
That
But
sounded like a tease, but maybe you're involved in recruiting somebody.
No, I will be working. I'm going to help make sure that we're getting new voters registered. I'm going to make sure that we are hitting the ground, making sure people are turning out to vote, because there will be a vote coming up, and I can't get too much into it. I'm here in the House, so I won't really talk about voting. But we are we'll be doing the work.
Well, I think the House rules are suspended until there's a speaker, so you might have a little bit more leeway right now.
But we're also talking about folks that want to tell us that we can't help our constituents right now, that are saying that, oh, maybe you're breaking the law if you help your constituents right now, while we don't have a speaker, even though they're the reason why we don't have a speaker. So we don't know what's going to happen. Things are changing every moment out here on the floor, and so I'm just going to be careful and follow the rules.
I understand. Congresswoman, we hope to hear back from you when there is some order restored to the House of Representatives. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's turn back to House Representative Rasheen Aldridge, joining us from Jefferson City now. She was talking about some of the state issues, and right when we interrupted that conversation about Missouri Republicans who wanted to make it harder to change the state constitution, some of those remarks we heard from House leadership, Senate leadership this week in Jefferson City, and they laid out their arguments in favor of putting that roadblock there, or raising the threshold to change the Constitution. Listen.
And throughout this process, our Constitution has been inundated with words about policy, words about bingo and marijuana that belong in our state statute books and do not belong in our state's guiding document. We will make it a priority of this Senate to raise the bar for entrance into our Constitution. While I have no desire to make it harder for citizens to have their voice heard through the initiative petition process, through increased and unnecessary hurdles, I simply and firmly believe that the threshold for adding or changing our Constitution should be higher than a simple majority.
House Democrats believe, as the very first section of the Missouri Constitution says, that all political power is vested in and derives from the people, and that any attempt to strip the people of their power to propose and enact laws is antithetical to democracy.
If you look at the past several elections, Missourians have been on the right side of these issues. Progressive issues like expanding Medicaid, addressing things around ethics reform. Clearly, we were able to legalize marijuana, which would now address the fact that many people have been put in prison for marijuana crimes and still are in there today. So clearly, it seems the Republican Party is not lining up with the values of the rest of the state.
The last one that was just passed had 40 pages that we added to our Constitution. I think that's language that most people don't understand. It's hard to enumerate what 40 pages would look like in the Constitution and the finite amount of words that you get to put before the voters. So I, too, support constitutional initiative petition reform. I want the voters to be less influenced by deep pocket, out-of-state interest and more informed about what they're voting for.
We will absolutely not stand for the voices of Missouri citizens to be disenfranchised and to make it harder for them to participate. I do know that the other side of the aisle is looking at all sorts of ways, not just Constitution, but also through the statutorily changing all of those things, whether it's thresholds or prices per signature. I think there were over 20 bills filed last legislative session. We know that's going to be a priority, but we also know that the citizens like that process, and we shouldn't be taking it away.
Shouldn't be taking it away. That's House Minority Leader Crystal Quaid, the leader of your caucus, the House Democrats there. Chime in here. Does Speaker Blocker have a point that there should be some limit to how many pages you can write into the Constitution through the petition process? You're not putting 40 pages on the ballot for voters to kind of scour over. They would just skip it.
I think it's bigger than, 40 pages does sound like a lot. And you don't want to grow the Constitution too much. But what this is truly an attack on is an attack on the democracy of people being able to decide what they want to see into law outside of the legislative process. Because what we've seen over the last several years is, like Senator Williams said, many of these issues voters have been on the right side on. And many of these issues haven't just been like an urban supported issue. This has been a statewide type of support from voters all across the state, especially Medicaid expansion, where we've struggled to try to implement that on the state level. And even after the voters passed it, the other side continued to try to make it harder for people people to just have access to health care. And the reality is it's not just people in urban areas that are needing access to health care. I mean, we're talking about these rural areas as well, of folks that, need the help of not just health care, minimum wage increase, issues that they're voting on that they truly believe in, and that's good for the state.
On union issues, on the right to work, on expanded Medicaid, on a number of those issues, there was strong rural support for those issues, but those voters, while they may back ideas that Democrats like, they elect Republicans. What's the disconnect? Do Missouri Democrats have a messaging problem?
I believe we do have a little bit of a messaging problem, to be honest, but I think bigger than that, what has been the problem is the districts have been gerrymandered. That's what I'm very hopeful about after these last redistricting that just took place. We have, we redistrict every 10 years. When you look at the new maps, it's been a long time since the House, the way that it works out, the House and the Senate draws a map, but the House was actually able to come together, Republican 5 members or 5 Democrat members, to be able to draw a map that was actually fair and balanced. That's why you've seen actual more Democrat seats picked up.
Picked up 3 seats.
Picked up 3 seats. I think a little bit more than 3, but
in the end, it was a net three-seat gain for Missouri
And
Democrats.
I think what you'll see over these next couple years, over the next 2 years and over the next 4 years, is more Democrats getting elected, because the way that they've drawn these seats has been compact. It's been in a way where they draw a lot of Democrats into one. But I'm hopeful that that's going to change over these next few years in the legislature.
Very interesting. That's part of the debate circling around whether or not voters can change the Constitution, how hard that might become, but legislators have a chance to change the law books themselves. One of those areas might be around crime and guns in particular. Take a listen to what some of the leadership had to say about public safety and whether or not any kind of gun control or gun safety legislation might have a chance in Jefferson City this year.
We must also address the sobering crime pandemic that plagues our state. Many people do not feel safe in their communities. As legislators, you have the opportunity to improve public safety. We need truth in sentencing legislation. Members of juries and witnesses at trials should not have to fear encounters with those convicted of serious crimes, but prematurely released from custody without having served meaningful sentences.
Everybody is talking about crime. It was one of the biggest campaign attacks against everybody was crime. We need to have a discussion that goes beyond just the top lines and political talking points. And I think, again, if we lean on law enforcement to have that discussion about what is preventing them from being successful with their jobs, then we can have some real conversations for solutions.
Gun violence has been a serious issue in our state and in our country. So we filed legislation to repeal the conceal and carry permit law to ensure that folks who carry guns do have training, and that law enforcement do know who those folks are that should and should not have guns. We know that it's not mutually exclusive to the Second Amendment, and it will not eradicate all of the violence, but it'll be a really good start to address what we've seen has become a serious issue. And again, I can't look another kid in the face and know that we're not doing everything we can here in the legislature to curb violence.
There is every year. I'm not going to ignore anybody. This is a transparent process where I think we need to vet things, and we will work together across leadership lines, across the lines, period, in the aisle. But I stand firmly with the Second Amendment. This state strongly has supported the Second Amendment for a long time. We see the gun amendments year in, year out. It's always just been there. The voters have supported our Second Amendment stance. So I see a strong Second Amendment support continuing.
Representative Aldridge, can you support the Second Amendment and repeal concealed carry?
I think you can. The thing is, a lot of people on my side of the aisle, on the Democratic side, we're not against the Second Amendment. We're not against people having the right to own a gun. It is about being responsible as a gun owner. Anytime you talk about any type of gun legislation in Jefferson City, the other side of the aisle, Republicans look at it as an attack on guns. And the reality is, it is too easy to be able to get a firearm and to be able to use a firearm in the state of Missouri without any type of background, without any type of permit, without anything. And we feel it a lot in the urban area. And us Democrats constantly are filing legislation. I file legislation that creates a registry. So all these guns that are coming up on our streets that people are getting, where are they coming from? They're not just, young folks aren't just going to the gun store and getting them. Somehow these guns are being trafficked into the community. People are either selling the guns, but we need to get tougher laws on how do we make sure that these guns that are out here are being used in a responsible way. And our laws are so loose when it comes to guns. I mean, anybody can go buy one. You don't really need a license to have one.
Would you raise the legal age to buy a long gun to 21?
I would support that. I would support that. Again, it's not an attack on firearms, but what we've even recently seen at the shooting right here in the city of Detroit, I think there's a levels to what happened there. But if you can raise the age up to 21, at least you're giving guns to people who just are a little bit more responsible. I mean, I'm 28. I remember what it used to be not too long ago, 18. My mind frame was a lot different when I was 18 than when I was 21, from 25 to 28 now. Each year I become more mature, I grow, I learn, and to be able to purchase any type of gun at the age of 18 with no training, no background, it's problematic for people who believe in the Second Amendment and people who just want to live in a city to be safe and not have to worry about walking down the street, seeing somebody carrying around a big AK-47 and there's no repercussions to it because they have the right to do that.
You mentioned the school incident, and there was some discussion from leadership and from Democrats at the top about where the debate in Jefferson City will head this year, to the classroom, indeed, not only on teacher pay, but on what kinds of topics teachers are allowed to discuss. Take a listen.
It is no secret that I consider myself an education reformer, and I believe that we should provide every opportunity possible for parents and kids to achieve the greatest successes possible for them.
We also know that the keys to opportunity starts with access to education. Missourians should have opportunities to choose where they send their children for a high-quality education. And parents should have a stronger voice as it relates to their kids each day.
As a mother, I am more concerned about my kids coming home safe from school than about any need for my government to censor what they learn.
How do you evaluate the politics or the policy of this discussion where it seems some Republicans have decided it's politically expedient or good politics for them to gin up controversy about any teacher who might broach the topic of race, for example, in the classroom?
I'll be honest, these last 2 years, this issue have kind of came out of nowhere, especially they frame it as critical race theory. It really has been a hot topic that Republicans all of a sudden have made a trigger issue and blowing up to make it to be more than what it really is. It's been disgusting to have these conversations. I believe in the hard-working men and women that teach our young educators and teaching them the right thing to do. They've been doing it for years. All of a sudden now this is an issue. The bigger conversations that we need to have is how do we pay them a livable wage? The things that they're teaching kids in the classroom isn't a problem. And what's been unfortunate is the other side of the aisle have used this in a political way to anger people, to take it to school boards, to make teachers even feel unsafe in the classroom, not comfortable with being able to say certain stuff because a parent can say, oh, well, my child is learning something that I don't want them to learn. These are certified teachers. These are teachers that went to school for this, that they love doing this. They love the kids. And the fact that, you have lawmakers trying to intervene in the classroom, if it's not a woman's body, now here they go with trying to intervene in the classroom. Mm-hmm. There's some things that we can do with education, and this issue is not the one we need to be trying to make a fight about. Even
on the pay issue, Democrats said let's raise the wage floor for teachers. From the bottom up, let's just pay everybody more in the classroom. And Republicans floated this idea of saying and I don't exactly know what the bill would look like, but let's have merit-based pay, which sounds like some sort of incentive, perhaps based on test scores. Again, I'm guessing here. You have to fill in some of the gaps until we see the actual bill and the legislation, but what other merit-based pay incentive could you have for a teacher outside of test scores?
Correct. I mean, at the end of the day, like you say, we just need to raise the base salary for all teachers. We don't need to put in incentives. We don't need to put in certain caveats because each school district is different. As someone who went to Parkway but lived in the city, mm-hmm. Some communities have more resources to be able to teach kids in a way that other schools don't. And even when you look in rural Missouri, they're going to 4 days a week because they can't even pay their teachers.
They're trying to address
money.
Maybe a teacher shortage or something there. But we saw Minority Leader Quaid acknowledge the education system is not meeting the standards we want it to at this point. There are failures to point at in the system. How do you get at those as a legislator? Can you? What are things you can do to improve education across the board?
I'm excited. There is some education language that as I've talked to other representatives and people in the building, I'm excited that there is some bills that will be coming across to figure out how do we make sure we give and support school districts that are moving kids in a way more proficient than they haven't been. So giving schools that are in impoverished neighborhood a little bit more resources to be able to teach those kids, but as those kids increase from their math and as they increase from their reading, giving that school a little bit more support compared to a school where it's already a lot of support, where those kids traditionally would probably be on their average reading level, if not already beyond that.
All right, we're spraying to a lot of fields here, talking about different policy ideas and debates that are soon to come in Jefferson City. Can you believe that our guest today, Representative Rasheen Aldridge, wants to step away from all that? You've made some announcements recently. You're running for alderman.
Correct.
In the newly redrawn ward, twice the size of what they once were in the spring. Why would you trade that job in Jefferson City for this job in St. Louis?
Yeah. Well, right now I'm not stepping away. I'll still be the state representative for the next few months. There's a lot of priority things that I still want to get done. I want to work with both sides of the aisle to, get some pieces of legislation that I think Missourians can truly be excited about.
But if you win your election?
If I win my election, I would have to resign in April.
Which is before the deadline.
Before the deadline.
Which means you probably, I don't want to make any predictions on when these bills would come up for final votes, but you might not be the person in that chair if you win your race.
That is true, but I'll be able to help kind of lay that groundwork, because if a lot of stuff moved before spring break. So to be able to have bills move through committees, to be able to support bills that I think are going to be helpful before April comes, because right as April, it'll probably be the middle of April, we only have a month left in Jeff City. A lot of pieces of legislation that will be most likely passed and sent to the governor will have probably been worked on in the April timeframe. But
you're not tuned out of Jefferson City. I just quizzed you on a number of these issues, and you seem to be paying close attention to some of the minutia of these items. So why step away if you're so plugged into Jefferson City? How do you make that choice to say, you know what, this is where my time would be better spent at City Hall?
As being a state rep for the last 4 years, it is, it's been an honor. It's still an honor to be in Jefferson City. I learned a lot. I've been really effective in the super minority. I've advocated over $18 million back home to areas in the ward and in my district. As these wards are reducing, I think this is a critical time for St. Louis City.
And the pay is raising.
And the pay is raising. We don't know what that would look like, but reducing the number of wards that have less people with the new leadership like Megan Green, who's the president board of Alderwoman, and Tashara Jones in there. I think this is a huge opportunity for the city of St. Louis to elect people that's going to be able to move our city forward. And I think with my background as having really, as legislators, we do a lot of policy, and that's not really the main focus down there in City Hall. It's a lot of constituent service, which is important, but we need to get to innovative policies that's going to move our city forward.
You're up against two incumbents who are already members of the Board of Aldermen, James Page and Brandon Bosley.
Yes.
How are you better than them? They have more experience in that job.
Yes. Well, majority of my district covers, about 80% of my district covers a new ward. Even when I'm not in Jefferson City, I'm very on the ground, kind of boots as my organizing activist background kick in, very in tune to the community, very engaged with the community. I think there's been some things that have happened over these past several years with both aldermen, which I have a great deal of respect for, that haven't really truly heard the voice of the people that have elected them, and not doing...
What's an example of that?
Well, I would say, with Alderman Page voting against the bill that would give families a $500. That is in the ward that we live in.
The guaranteed basic income.
The guaranteed basic income. The ward that we live in the 5th ward, which would be the new 14th ward, it's very diverse. It's like my district. You have downtown, but you have areas like Murphy Park. You have areas like Carr Square, Old North St. Louis. That medium income is like $15,000, $20,000, and to vote against things like that, and to vote against things if it's Alderman Brandon Bosley to try to set up a commission where we look at our charter and see, the charter hasn't been changed. You talk about the state level, how
you
we
would
change it a
support
lot.
the charter commission?
I would support it. I think there's...
To make what changes?
I think as I've looked at it, there's a lot of antiquated stuff. Even as Alderwoman Carrie Spencer talked about, there's licensing for raw milk pasteurized individuals. We haven't touched the charter compared to like the Constitution on the state level in years. And
so the city is stuck in the past and needs an update.
Basically, and only way, I mean, the charter is like the Bible for the city, if you want to look at it that way. And we haven't looked at the charter in a very long time. And I believe it gives community input. One thing that I say is the 3 E's: educate, engage, and empower. By allowing the citizens to sit on a commission to overlook the charter and see the changes that need to be made, that's important of true community engagement. There's one, there's a level of being an alderperson, but there's also a level of empowering people to also feel like that they're making a difference in their city, they're making a difference in their neighborhood, and it's not just completely up to the elected official.
All right, Representative Rasheen Aldridge, hoping to become Alderman Rasheen Aldridge. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to have your rival candidates, Alderman James Page and Brandon Bosley. We hope to hear from them in the weeks leading up to this spring election. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We should tell our audience that in Illinois right now, the House and Senate are currently debating a ban on assault rifles. We should know more on that process in the weeks, the days to come, really. This lame duck session concluding on Monday over the weekend, and they will be inaugurating their House and Senate next week. We'll also hear from Governor J.B. Pritzker, just recently reelected, his inauguration speech on Monday. So next week on the record, we'll have a lot more voices from Illinois politics joining us. They're also looking at expanding protections and licensing for more providers to provide abortion in Illinois right now. Those debates ongoing just across the river, just to kind of give you a bit of a tease as to what and who we might hear from at the same time next week on the record. Until then, we're off the record.